Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Schnell, has ICE or anyone else at DHS attempted to coordinate their operations with state and local law enforcement, or even notified them when they are conducting immigration enforcement, according to your knowledge?
Senator, I believe this is one of the challenges, and may speak a little bit to the chairman's earlier question, that there has not been a planful approach. There has not been efforts to coordinate or discuss their targets. We have not been provided with a list of targets, as a for instance, where there could be some opportunities where we have those dangerous people that represent a risk to Minnesota's public safety that we could coordinate. So that has not happened.
So it hasn't. They have not been attempting to coordinate with local law enforcement, what you've seen. And you have your current experience. You also have a long and distinguished career as in police in the community, including a police chief for a number of communities. So they have not coordinated, to your knowledge. So what danger to public safety and local law enforcement does this lack of coordination from DHS result in?
Well, I think, Senator, what we see is a situation that is crisis-driven. And I think the challenges are when things get out of hand, then it was we need local law enforcement to protect ICE and ICE operations. When in fact, if coordination had happened from the get-go, I think a lot of this could have been avoided. And there's a long history, whether it's Minneapolis Police, the Department of Corrections, any law enforcement in Minnesota, of strong collaboration with federal partners. For instance, the Department of Homeland Security Investigations Division does a lot of work with transnational drug investigations on task forces that law enforcement are actively involved in. And these are really positive and important public safety ventures. And yet, this particular intrusion into the state really was done solely by them without coordination, and that has created, I think, a public safety mess for our state, and something that I think we should all be concerned about.
Well, that's significant. So they are not reaching out to try to coordinate an action. It sounds like from your testimony, if I'm correct, it's only when it gets a crisis situation because it's out of control that they had lost control. Then they call for help from the police. Please help us. We're messing this operation up.
I think, Senator, that's precisely, I think, what we have seen over the course of time is that as things became more crisis-oriented after the two shootings, the two deaths, then there was this need for collaboration and securing ICE agents and even the local ICE facility in Minneapolis.
Okay. So lack of attempt to even coordinate at the front end is a significant problem, and I hear you. Attorney General Ellison, I'm going to ask you another related question to that coordination. Can you describe the coordination between DHS or DOJ with the state and local officials into the investigations of the tragic shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy?
We haven't had any Senator, we haven't had any cooperation up until now, which is really unusual because in prior cases where there's been a federal and state interest in a crime, we've seen collaboration between federal and state authorities. It's how we normally do work. It's not unusual at all. And in fact, this situation, when we were told you can't have access to the evidence, to the crime scene, that was highly unusual and surprising to us. And so we're hoping that we can gain cooperation, perhaps in the Preddy matter, but we've been advised that the Good matter is the feds are not investigating it, and we still haven't received any access to the evidence that is involved in that case. So it's an unusual, strange situation, but we're with good faith, hoping that things will change.
So that's important. You're saying in the past they've worked with you or other folks.
Yeah.
But in these two cases, they're stonewalling you?
That's a yes. That's a yes.
Wow. Well, Commissioner Schnell, as a former local police chief, as I mentioned earlier, is cutting out law enforcement, cutting out local law enforcement a common and effective way to actually conduct an investigation?
Senator, no. I think, the operations, as the Attorney General pointed out, of close collaboration and sharing of evidence And we saw that in rather significant cases where there was both a local investigation and prosecution, as well as a federal investigation and prosecution in other cases. So, I think as we look at the public safety of Minnesota, the public safety of our country, collaboration between law enforcement and focused and targeted enforcement on issues of critical importance, whether that's human trafficking or large-scale drug interdictions, these things need to continue, and we need to get back on track for those matters. And I think that's where success can happen. That's where success has happened in collaboration, but that's not what's happening currently as we see in Minneapolis and Minnesota.
Okay. So the next question is to both of you. This administration has basically demanded that Minnesota state and local agencies use their extremely limited resources to basically subsidize DHS operations, is what we're hearing. Now, this is despite DHS receiving well over $100 billion from the Republican spending bill to conduct the kinds of operations we're seeing on these streets. So given recent reporting that only 14% of arrests made by DHS are individuals with a criminal record, would you say this is a good use of those limited state resources that you have to protect the people on the streets of your local communities, to help ICE round up mothers on their way to work or children getting off the school bus, or should you be using that to fight crime on your streets and making the people safe in your communities? And how does that strain your ability to provide public safety for the residents that you serve? Attorney General Ellison, you want to take the first stab?
Yeah, well, Senator, look, crime in Minnesota and in Minneapolis has been going down. We're grateful for that, but we still need every resource we can to protect public safety. And the fact is, resources are very limited. I think that given the proper circumstances, legal cooperation makes sense, but we simply don't have the state budget to be deputized to carry out functions that are reserved constitutionally to the federal government. That's their business. We have our business. And where we can work together, that's a good idea, but we simply cannot just convert our resources over to the federal government.
So,
Senator, I simply can't imagine how many dollars have been spent in Operation Metro Surge. It's staggering. The cost of human life, as well as just the actual financial resources, is hard to even imagine, especially when we look at the numbers that we're talking about. When we look at what is happening operationally, it becomes hard to understand. And certainly, taking resources away from the local community would be contrary to public safety in our state. And I think it's also important to say that we didn't ask for this level of assistance. I think we have seen crime go down in our state. And this certainly has not been ultimately beneficial to the safety of our state.
thank you.
Senator Johnson.